Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something many don't fully understand. Respect, not love, not attraction, not desire, but respect. Because while love may be felt and desire may come and go, respect is the foundation that sustains any meaningful connection, especially when it comes to women and the men they choose to admire, trust, and honor. The truth is, women respect a very specific kind of man. I know it's not just the rich, the charming, or the physically dominant. It's deeper than that. It's about who a man is at his core. A man who truly respects himself stands out in a world where many people seek validation from others to feel whole. He doesn't need external approval to define his worth because he already knows who he is. This self-awareness creates a powerful energy around him that naturally earns respect, especially from women. When a man has self-respect, it shows in everything he does, in the way he speaks, the choices he makes, the people he allows into his life, and most importantly, in how he handles himself when no one is watching. Self-respect is not about being prideful or arrogant. It is about having a quiet confidence that comes from living in alignment with one's values. A man with self-respect has boundaries, not walls to keep people out, but healthy lines that protect his peace, his time, and his energy. He is clear on what he will and will not tolerate. If someone speaks to him in a demeaning way, he doesn't react with aggression or desperation. He simply removes himself. If someone tries to manipulate or disrespect him, he doesn't try to win them over. He lets them go with dignity. This kind of inner strength is incredibly attractive to women because it signals stability. When a man respects himself, he is not swayed by desperation or the need to be liked. He doesn't chase people who treat him poorly, and he certainly doesn't beg for love. He knows that true connection cannot be forced, and that trying to prove your worth to someone else is a losing battle. Instead, he holds himself to a high standard and expects the same from others. Women instinctively test boundaries, not maliciously, but often subconsciously, to see if a man truly stands on what he says. A man who respects himself doesn't flinch under pressure. He doesn't change his standards because he's afraid of losing someone. He doesn't allow charm or beauty to cloud his judgment. If someone's behavior is out of alignment with his values, he will choose to walk away rather than betray himself. That kind of discipline is powerful, and it naturally commands respect. There's a deep sense of peace in a man who has self-respect. He's not always trying to prove, fix, or chase. He simply is. He moves with purpose, speaks with honesty, and listens with presence. He's not trying to dominate the room, but his presence is felt. He doesn't boast, yet people admire him. He doesn't seek to control, yet people feel secure around him. That's the effect of self-respect. It radiates confidence without noise. Many men struggle to earn respect because they focus too much on external things, money, looks, status. But what they don't realize is that women may be attracted to those things in the short term, but they don't build long-term respect. What builds lasting respect is character, integrity, consistency. The man who follows through on his word, the man who keeps promises to himself, the man who doesn't lower his standards just because he's afraid to be alone. And this kind of man doesn't seek relationships to fill a void. He's already full within himself. When he chooses a partner, it's from a place of wholeness, not need. He doesn't look for someone to complete him. He looks for someone who complements his life. That's why women feel safe around him. He's not trying to control or impress. He's simply offering his presence, his authenticity, and his truth. That's rare, that's valuable. When a woman meets a man like this, she notices the difference immediately. He doesn't try too hard. He doesn't play games. He's not afraid to say no, to walk away, or to take his time. And that's when she begins to see him not just as someone to like, but someone to respect. Respect is born when a man is willing to put himself first, not out of selfishness, but out of deep self-love. When a man prioritizes his values, protects his peace, and holds himself to a high standard, he sets the tone for how others treat him. Ultimately, the foundation of all respect begins within. A man who respects himself teaches others how to treat him without saying a word. His energy speaks for him. His actions speak louder than his intentions. And in a world full of noise, this quiet strength is what women admire the most. Not the man who boasts about who he is, but the man who lives it without needing to explain. That's the kind of man who earns lasting respect. Emotional discipline is one of the most underrated qualities a man can possess. Yet it's one of the most powerful forces that shape how a woman perceives and respects him. It's not about hiding feelings or pretending to be unaffected. Rather, it's about being in control of those feelings, especially when they are intense or overwhelming. A man with emotional discipline doesn't let his emotions lead him. Instead, he leads them. He feels deeply, but he doesn't react impulsively. This control creates trust, safety, and admiration from the people around him, especially from women. There's a huge difference between being emotionally open and being emotionally unstable. A man who is emotionally disciplined can express himself clearly and honestly without being reactive. He knows how to pause before he speaks, to consider the weight of his words, and to understand the emotional energy of the moment. He doesn't explode in anger, guilt, trip his partner, or sulk in silence. He faces emotional tension with clarity and calmness, which allows him to stay in his power regardless of how difficult the conversation or situation may be. For a woman, this kind of stability is essential. It signals maturity and strength. When a man can hold space for her emotions and his own without falling apart or trying to control the situation, it builds deep respect. It shows that he's not just emotionally intelligent, but emotionally secure. He's not trying to win every argument. He's not shutting down or avoiding difficult topics. He's not emotionally needy or constantly trying to be reassured. He stands firm, listens fully, and responds with awareness. In contrast, many men who lack emotional discipline fall into two extremes. They either suppress everything and act cold, or they overreact and become emotionally unpredictable. Both extremes damage trust and erode respect. A woman cannot feel secure with a man whose emotional reactions are erratic or whose communication is full of passive aggression, blame, or rage. On the other hand, when a man takes responsibility for his emotions and chooses conscious responses over emotional impulses, he earns her trust. And from trust, respect naturally flows. There is power in restraint. When a man is able to remain calm in the heat of an argument, when he doesn't let his ego take over in moments of tension, when he listens instead of interrupting, when he doesn't escalate a situation just to prove a point, that's when a woman sees his emotional maturity. It tells her, this man can handle life. He can handle me. He can handle his own storms. That kind of energy makes her feel safe. And where there is emotional safety, there is space for deeper connection and respect. Emotional discipline also means that a man doesn't let his feelings dictate his decisions. He may feel anger, but he doesn't let it make him cruel. He may feel sadness, but he doesn't allow it to paralyze him. He may feel fear, but he still chooses courage. This inner authority over his emotional world doesn't come from suppressing how he feels, but from understanding and mastering it. It's the ability to observe emotion without becoming consumed by it. That level of self-control shows leadership, not over others, but over oneself. One of the most attractive things about a man who is emotionally grounded is that he doesn't blame others for his emotional state. He takes full ownership of how he feels and how he behaves. He doesn't need a woman to fix him or carry the weight of his emotional baggage. He does the inner work. He regulates himself. And because of that, he brings balance to the relationship. He doesn't turn conflict into chaos. He doesn't use silence as a weapon. He doesn't crumble under pressure. He communicates with clarity and moves with purpose. It's important to remember that women are highly intuitive when it comes to emotional energy. They may not always articulate it, but they can feel when a man is unsteady inside. They can sense when he's not in control of himself, and it makes them pull back. But when they sense that a man is emotionally anchored, not cold, but calm, they lean in. They admire his presence. They feel seen, heard, and safe. They trust him, not just with their body, but with their heart. A man with emotional discipline creates a space where love can grow, where conflict doesn't destroy, and where connection deepens over time. He is consistent. He is honest. He is emotionally generous without being emotionally reckless. And in doing so, he earns not just love or admiration, but deep, lasting respect. Because any man can raise his voice or walk away, but a man who can stay grounded in the storm, that's the kind of man a woman will never forget. A man who lives with purpose stands out in a way that is undeniable. He doesn't just wake up and exist. He moves through life with intention, direction, and meaning. This kind of man isn't drifting, waiting for someone to give him identity or significance. He already knows who he is, what he's working toward, and what he values. That kind of clarity commands attention, and more importantly, it commands respect, especially from women. While attraction may draw someone in, it is purpose that keeps their interest rooted in admiration. When a man has something he's building, a vision that drives him, or a mission that fuels his energy, it makes him magnetic in a way that charm alone never can. Women respect a man who is not obsessed with the relationship, but rather is building a life worth sharing. This doesn't mean he neglects love, but that love is part of his journey, not the destination. He isn't looking to be saved, completed, or constantly entertained. His life already has meaning before a woman enters it. And when she does, he doesn't shift his entire world to revolve around her. He continues to move toward his goals, his calling, and his responsibilities, and invites her to grow alongside him. This independence is powerful. It communicates that he's not relying on a woman to give him validation. He's not needy. He's not lost. He's not aimless. His sense of identity doesn't come from being in a relationship. It comes from being a man of value, with or without anyone by his side. That's deeply attractive and reassuring to a woman because it tells her that he isn't just looking for emotional comfort. He's offering leadership and direction. When a man lacks purpose, he often fills the space with obsession over relationships. He gets overly invested too quickly, becomes emotionally dependent, and can easily lose himself trying to gain love or approval. Over time, this creates a dynamic where the woman starts to feel the weight of carrying his emotional well-being. It's draining, and eventually respect begins to fade. But when a man is grounded in something larger than himself, a craft, a vision, a mission, it allows the relationship to breathe. There's balance, there's space, there's mutual growth. Purpose also creates resilience. A man who is mission-driven doesn't fall apart when things go wrong. He adapts, he recalibrates, he keeps going. Life can hit him with setbacks, and though he may bend, he doesn't break. That steadiness in the face of adversity shows a woman that he can handle pressure, not just the pressures of life, but the pressures that naturally come within a relationship. It's easier to trust a man who doesn't quit on himself when things get hard, because it means he won't easily quit on her either. Another powerful thing about purpose is that it defines a man's standards. He doesn't allow just anyone into his world because he knows his time and energy are precious. He doesn't chase people to avoid loneliness because he understands that his path requires focus and discipline. This discernment is attractive. It shows he values quality over quantity in work, in friendships, and in relationships. When a woman knows she had to meet a certain standard to be part of his life, she respects him more because she knows he doesn't give his energy away cheaply. Purpose also gives a man direction in his decision-making. He's not easily swayed by external noise or temporary feelings. He makes choices based on where he's going, not just where he is. He knows what he stands for and what he won't tolerate. That level of clarity brings structure to his life, and structure makes women feel safe. Safe to trust, safe to relax, and safe to admire. Because even if she doesn't fully understand his vision, she can feel his commitment to it, and that makes her believe in him. A purposeful man doesn't need to be loud about what he's doing. His actions speak for him. He moves with quiet confidence, not for applause, but because it's who he is. He isn't trying to impress anyone. He's focused on progress. That authenticity, that raw dedication to growth is what separates him from the average. It's what makes women look at him with not just desire, but with deep respect. At the end of the day, purpose is the fire that keeps a man alive inside. It gives him direction, clarity, and strength. And when a man lives with purpose, everything about him becomes intentional. His love, his presence, his time, and his decisions. Women see that, they feel that. And more than anything, they respect it. A man who communicates with strength and clarity holds a kind of power that goes beyond charm or charisma. In a world full of mixed signals, passive, aggressive behavior, emotional avoidance, and games, a man who knows how to speak his truth confidently and respectfully stands out. He doesn't speak to manipulate or impress. He speaks to connect, to clarify, and to lead. And women deeply respect this quality because it creates emotional safety, removes confusion, and reflects a man who knows himself well enough to express what he thinks and feels without fear. When a man communicates clearly, he eliminates uncertainty. He doesn't leave a woman guessing where she stands or what he's thinking. He says what he means and means what he says. If he's interested, he says so without fear of being too much. If he's not, he doesn't string anyone along. If something bothers him, he brings it up calmly and directly, not with silence. Not with sarcasm and not with emotional outbursts. This level of openness builds trust. A woman knows she can rely on his word because he isn't trying to avoid conflict or gain approval. He's simply grounded in truth. A man with strong communication skills doesn't shy away from difficult conversations. He understands that real intimacy is built through honesty, not comfort. So when things get tense, he doesn't retreat or attack. He leans into the moment with intention. He listens fully before responding. He doesn't interrupt to defend his ego, nor does he shut down to avoid discomfort. He stays engaged, curious, and aware, not to control the outcome, but to honor the process of connection. That emotional presence is rare, and it tells a woman that she's not alone in navigating challenges. She has a partner who can handle depth, not just surface level affection. Women respect men who can express their needs without guilt or apology. Too often, men are either too afraid to voice what they want out of fear of being rejected, or they express their desires in aggressive, demanding ways. Neither creates respect. But when a man calmly and confidently states his boundaries, expectations, or desires without pressure or fear, it shows a level of maturity that invites real connection. It communicates, this is who I am, this is what I value, and I trust that if you're the right person, you'll understand, respond with the same clarity. Another important aspect of strong communication is consistency. A man's words must align with his actions. If he says one thing and does another, trust breaks down, and with it, respect. But when a man follows through on what he says, even in the small things, it sends a powerful message. It says, I take responsibility for my words. That reliability creates a sense of emotional security. A woman doesn't have to second guess him or read between the lines. She can relax in his presence because she knows he's not playing games. Tone also matters. A man who communicates with strength and clarity doesn't need to be loud, aggressive, or dominant. In fact, the strongest communicators often speak in calm, composed tones. Their authority comes not from force, but from certainty. They don't raise their voices to feel powerful. They raise the quality of their message. They choose their words with care, not to manipulate, but to build understanding. That balance of confidence and respect in conversation is what makes women listen and what makes them respect the man behind the words. And when misunderstandings happen, as they always do, a man with clear communication skills doesn't defend his pride at the expense of connection. He's willing to clarify, to apologize when needed, and to seek mutual understanding without getting defensive or shutting down. This shows emotional intelligence, the ability to put ego aside for the sake of resolution. Women pay close attention to how a man communicates in conflict because it reveals his inner strength. And if a man can remain calm, honest, and grounded even when emotions are high, that earns lasting respect. Lastly, a man who communicates well doesn't just talk. He listens. And he listens not just to respond, but to understand. He hears what's being said and what's not being said. He pays attention to emotional cues. He validates her experience without trying to fix her. He creates a space where she can be open, vulnerable, and expressive. And that space becomes sacred, because being heard is one of the most powerful human needs. And when a woman feels truly heard by a man, her respect for him deepens immeasurably. Strong, clear communication isn't about having the perfect words. It's about speaking with honesty, confidence, and presence. It's about showing up fully and saying what needs to be said, even when it's hard. And when a man communicates like this, he separates himself from the rest. Because while many can talk, few can speak from a place of grounded strength. And that's the kind of man a woman doesn't just like. She respects him. She trusts him. And she knows his voice carries weight, not just in conversation, but in her life. A man who chooses peace over power struggles demonstrates a level of self-control and emotional maturity that is not only rare, but also deeply admirable. In many relationships, the need to be right, to dominate, or to win becomes the silent killer of connection and respect. But the man who understands that real strength lies in maintaining harmony, not control, operates from a much higher level of consciousness. He doesn't engage in unnecessary arguments just to prove a point. He doesn't allow his ego to take the lead when emotions rise. Instead, he grounds himself in logic, calmness, and intentional communication, and that is what earns him respect. Power struggles are usually rooted in insecurity. When a man feels the need to constantly assert himself, dominate conversations, or have the final word, it often reveals a fragile ego disguised as confidence. He's trying to prove something to himself, to her, to the world. But true strength doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to overpower. It simply exists quietly and consistently. That kind of man doesn't enter into a battle just because he was challenged. He understands that not every disagreement requires a reaction, and not every difference in opinion is a threat to his identity. This ability to choose peace doesn't mean he's weak or passive. On the contrary, it takes far more strength to de-escalate conflict than to fuel it. A man who prioritizes peace is deliberate with his energy. He knows when to engage and when to walk away. He can speak his truth firmly, but without aggression. He can stand up for himself, but without disrespect. His confidence isn't about overpowering someone else. It's about not being shaken by someone else's chaos. That kind of control is powerful, and it inspires trust and admiration from the woman in his life. When disagreements arise, as they inevitably do, this man doesn't look at it as a battle to win. He sees it as an opportunity to understand, to grow, and to create deeper alignment. He listens to understand, not to defend. He asks questions instead of making accusations. He stays focused on resolving the issue, not tearing the other person down. This approach fosters emotional safety because the woman knows that she can bring up difficult topics without fearing an explosion or emotional shutdown. Women especially respect men who are emotionally secure enough to handle tension without turning it into warfare. It signals that he is not ruled by pride and that he values connection more than control. When a woman sees that a man is capable of staying calm, respectful, and grounded during conflict, she feels more open, more relaxed, and more trusting. She doesn't have to guard herself or tiptoe around sensitive topics. She can be herself fully, and that freedom breeds both love and respect. A man who avoids power struggles also knows when to let things go. He doesn't hold on to grudges, throw past mistakes into new conversations, or use emotional manipulation to gain the upper hand. He resolves issues and moves forward. He leads with emotional intelligence, not fear. That kind of presence makes a woman feel like she's not in competition with him, but rather in partnership with him. And it's in that space of mutual respect and shared peace that true intimacy can flourish. There's something very grounding about a man who doesn't need to prove his dominance in every conversation. He's not reactive to criticism. He's open to feedback. He doesn't interpret disagreement as disrespect. Instead, he welcomes it as a sign of honesty. That emotional openness is a sign of inner strength. It tells her, I'm not afraid of difficult truths, and I don't need to control everything to feel secure. That's rare. That's powerful. And it earns her respect in a way that force or authority never could. This man doesn't seek control because he has control of himself. He doesn't try to overpower because he already feels empowered from within. His peace isn't dependent on being right or being in charge. It comes from a deeper understanding that real leadership in a relationship isn't about dominance, it's about guidance, collaboration, and presence. He doesn't need to fight for control because he already leads by example. When a woman experiences this kind of peaceful strength in a man, she feels safe, seen, and respected. And in return, she offers her deepest respect to him, not because he demands it, because he embodies it. She sees that he's not a man who's afraid of conflict, but one who knows how to handle it with grace. And that makes her trust his leadership, his voice, and his presence. That's the kind of man she looks up to. That's the kind of man she honors. A man who stays true to himself, regardless of circumstances or company, is someone who naturally commands respect. He doesn't shift who he is to gain approval, nor does he mold his personality to fit into someone else's expectations. He is rooted, grounded, clear on his identity, values, and direction. And because of this unwavering sense of self, people, especially women, can feel his authenticity. In a world where so many wear masks or compromise their character to be liked, the man who dares to be himself, even when it's uncomfortable, stands out as a pillar of strength. This kind of man isn't arrogant or inflexible. He's not rigid in his thinking or blind to growth. On the contrary, he is always evolving, but never at the cost of his integrity. He doesn't betray himself to avoid conflict. He doesn't stay silent to avoid judgment. He speaks his truth, makes his decisions, and stands by them, not because he needs to be right, but because he refuses to be false. And this deep loyalty to self earns the kind of respect that no charm, money, or physical appearance ever could. Women are highly intuitive. They can sense when a man is performing versus when he's being real. A man who tries too hard to impress, who overcompensates, who changes depending on who he's with. That man may entertain for a moment, but he doesn't earn lasting respect. On the other hand, a man who is consistent in his identity, who shows up as the same person in private as he does in public, creates trust. He doesn't have to convince her of who he is. She can feel who he is. Staying true to oneself also means honoring one's values even when they're tested. If a man says he believes in honesty but lies to avoid discomfort, he compromises his own respect. If he says he values peace but resorts to manipulation during conflict, he loses credibility. But when a man holds the line, when he says what he believes, lives by those beliefs, and accepts the consequences with dignity, he becomes deeply respectable. Women don't want a man who is perfect. They want a man who is real, even when that realness comes with flaws. This kind of man is also unbothered by trends or social pressure. He doesn't chase popularity. He doesn't pretend to be someone he's not just to fit in. He chooses what aligns with his truth and lets go of what doesn't. That level of independence is powerful. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to be everything to everyone. And ironically, that's what makes people want to be around him even more. His self-trust gives others permission to be themselves. It's liberating, it's inspiring, and it's something women deeply respect. Being true to oneself also shows in how a man navigates relationships. He doesn't abandon his principles to keep someone interested. He doesn't tolerate disrespect just to avoid being alone. He doesn't beg for attention or try to earn love through sacrifice. Instead, he stands firm in what he believes he deserves. He chooses to walk away from anything that isn't aligned, not because he's cold or dismissive, but because he values himself too much to stay in places that shrink him. This self-loyalty sets the tone. It teaches people how to treat him. It lets a woman know that if she's in his life, it's because she adds value, not because he's desperate for company. And when a man doesn't need a relationship to feel complete, but chooses to share his completeness with someone worthy, that choice carries power. A woman respects that she was chosen by someone who didn't need her, but genuinely wanted her. That makes the bond stronger. There's also something very peaceful about being with a man who knows himself. He's not unpredictable. He's not constantly changing based on mood, crowd, or fear. He's steady, secure, aligned. She doesn't have to question his intentions because his words and actions match. She doesn't have to wonder who he really is because he shows her consistently. That dependability becomes a safe space for her, and where a woman feels emotionally safe, respect naturally flows. At the heart of it all, a man who stays true to himself sends one powerful message: I am enough as I am, not in a self-satisfied or stagnant way, but in a way that shows inner peace. He is always learning, always growing, but never abandoning who he is at the core. And that integrity, that refusal to betray his truth for anyone or anything, makes him unforgettable. Because while many men try to impress the world by becoming someone they're not, this man earns respect by simply being who he already is, unapologetically.